I am Tasha, and this is my FMP project. So, my project's pitch is called Talks with Tasha, and now let's move to the backstory. So, the backstory. I got the idea of doing the Talks with Tasha because I want to explore and do podcasts focusing on people of colour and the struggles they may face during their experiences on their day to day life. I've chosen to do this topic because I want to share my views on my struggles as being a black girl with others. I want to hear the struggles of other black girls and discuss how they overcame it, promoting self love and self care. And the skills I have had to prepare for myself for this task was learning about the backgrounds of my culture, as I'll be able to understand other people when they're coming across with their views. So let's look at the overall scope of the project. So my overall scope of the project is to influence black girls and promote self-love and self-care in the black community. The main thing I am focusing on is self-love, and in that, body love. So within that, they can love themselves and love their personality and love their skin. Now let's move on to the opportunity. This project is hoping to achieve and inspire people who are insecure, and most importantly, teaching them to love their skin they are in, no matter what opposition they may have faced in the past. The key culture I'm aiming to achieve is dark-skinned black females. I would say for this type of podcast, I don't really have any main competitors, as though not many people are exploring this topic, and it is very unique and not very looked at. Again. Now let's move on to target audience. So the target audience for this podcast is black female girls who love embracing their natural curls and their natural hair. Black girls who are insecure about their body appearance and they want to become more confident with that aspect of things. My exact age range is teenagers. Girls, so from about 13 to about 19-year-old, as I feel like during this time of their lives they tend to overthink a lot. It's very intense for them. They want to fit into the beauty standards, and especially at that age they will tend to reflect on their past, which is why we can talk about it and we can get some tips and get some experiences and an equal balance of both. So now let's look at the constraints of this project. So there are some constraints that may also affect my work for my podcast. For example, I may not be able to upload as many episodes as I should have done, or if I did not use the 2-camera rule properly in my podcast, because that's what I'm aiming to do, it might not show on me enough, or it might show on the other person too much. So I need to make sure that we have like an equal balance there. If my editing went bad, that would affect my final piece. And also to only record one track, that would be bad and disturb my podcast. And if I don't understand who my listeners are, I think this is very important, because as I'm like going to be interviewing them, I need to understand where they're coming from. I need to be able to bounce off them and reflect on them, so that it's not like any awkward stops and starts. Assumptions. I think that my podcast would do very well with black female girls who do feel insecure in themselves and their self-worth. I also think that other females from about, age 20 and above and 13 and below would interact with this podcast. They will want to learn about black beauty and learn what it's like for other black females. Even some males may tune in to understand how challenging it is to growing up as a black girl and how that can affect your self-confidence. But for this specific series, my main goal would be to cater for my target audience, which is teenage females. I do think this would do really, really well on YouTube, because not many people talk about personal topics, as they are very personal, and I'm ready to touch into that and go deeper. So now let's look at the resources I'm going to be needing to complete this podcast. To work on this project, the only actual members partaking in this project is just me. So I am the one who's going to be editing this project, and I'm the one who's going to be asking them the questions. However, I will utilize the help of my friend Harrison Gunn, who has experience with how to set up a good podcast and how to make it look very professional. Obviously, I'll edit and present by myself, but I'll also need that little push just to get this out there and also make sure it can be the best it can be. I will also need to use the radio rooms in the Global Academy, and I'll also need to book out some cameras for my podcast, and I'll also do need to book out some batteries, tripods, and all other equipment will be found in the radio room. And then from that, I think the podcast will be good to go. Obviously, I'll be using 2 cameras so I can get those 2 camera angles, but yeah, on the screen you guys can just read more about the ins and outs. So now let's look at the success rate of this podcast. I will measure my measure of success by how consistent I stay during this period, my work rate, and my attitude towards my work. It should be resilient and consistent. Like, even when it's going to get hard and even when it's going to get stressful, I will have to keep on going on and keep on making the content. So let's look at the envision. So there's a lot on this slide which you guys can take your time and read, but I'll just brief you through this slide. So this podcast will be 5 episodes featuring 5 different black girls. Each of them will be 10 minutes each, yeah, and we would have to look at a new topic in each episode. So one of them might be about self-loving yourself, and then the other episode might be about self-loving your hair or other experiences you've been through as a black female that's made you insecure. So each episode will focus deeper into one specific topic so we can target these things and get an overall success rate. The podcast will be published on my own YouTube channel, Tasha C, but I'll also upload it on Spotify as some people might just want to listen in quickfire podcast. And lastly, I'll also post them on Instagram Reels and TikTok to share this podcast to promote it with the best bits. And obviously that's going to get my podcast more out there. So guys, thank you so much for listening and I hope you look forward into my podcast.